Picture this, a narrow stretch of water just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through it flows one-fifth of the world's oil supply, 18 million barrels per day, 30% of all seaborne traded oil and liquefied natural gas. The Strait of Hormuz, the most strategically vital choke point on the planet. For decades, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps treated these waters like their personal lake, threatening closure, harassing vessels, laying mines, and holding the global economy hostage with the implicit threat that they could turn off the world's energy supply whenever they chose. Iran's leadership built an entire military doctrine around this waterway, genuinely believing their geographic position made them untouchable, that the world would tolerate their aggression rather than risk the consequences of a closed strait. They were catastrophically wrong, because right now, as you watch this, the United States Navy is systematically dismantling Iran's control over the Strait of Hormuz, destroying the naval assets Iran spent decades building, clearing the mines that turned these waters into a kill zone, and reopening the oil route that the global economy depends on. Welcome to Global Watch News. Today we are going inside the complete unraveling of Iran's stranglehold on Hormuz, the precision naval operation that broke it, and the devastating strategic miscalculation that turned Iran's greatest leverage into its final humiliation. If you want to stay ahead of the military and economic developments reshaping global energy security, now is the time to subscribe to Global Watch News and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video like this one. Let's start with the numbers, because they paint a picture more dramatic than any headline could capture. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration's March 2025 assessment, approximately 21 million barrels per day of petroleum and petroleum products flowed through the Strait of Hormuz before the current conflict began. That represents roughly 21% of global petroleum liquids consumption. In liquefied natural gas terms, the EIA reported that about 3.5 trillion cubic feet transited the strait in 2023, which is nearly one-third of all global LNG trade. But here is what changed. On February 28th, when Iran launched its opening saturation strike in the current war, IRGC naval forces simultaneously began Operation Martyr's Tide, deploying anti-ship mines across key transit lanes in the Strait and the Gulf of Oman. Within 72 hours, global oil shipping through Hormuz had collapsed by 87%, according to Lloyd's List intelligence tracking data published on March 4th. Insurance premiums for tankers attempting passage spiked by 1,200% overnight. Brent crude futures hit $147 per barrel on March 2nd, the highest price since 2008. The global economy was staring into the abyss. And then the United States responded. Operation Open Waters launched on March 6th. Within the first 96 hours of this naval campaign, U.S. Central Command reported the destruction of 43 Iranian naval vessels, the clearance of 127 confirmed naval mines, and the neutralization of 83% of Iran's coastal anti-ship missile batteries ringing the strait. By March 12th, oil shipments through Hormuz had recovered to 73% of pre-conflict levels. By March 18th, according to Vortexa Analytics, tanker traffic had reached 94% of normal flow rates. These are not projections. These are the figures coming directly from maritime intelligence firms, energy analysts, and U.S. Naval Forces Central Command briefings conducted in real time. But before we get to the mechanics of how all of this happened, we need to understand the strategic weapon at the center of this story. And that weapon is not a missile, it is not a bomb, it is a ship. The USS Nimitz Carrier Strike Group, supported by the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower Strike Group, both deployed to the Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman in what Pentagon officials are calling the most concentrated carrier presence in the region since Operation Iraqi Freedom in 2003. According to USNI News reporting on March 7th, the Nimitz Strike Group includes the carrier USS Nimitz, the guided missile cruiser USS Princeton, and the guided missile destroyers USS Sterett and USS Ralph Johnson. The Eisenhower Group includes its carrier, the cruiser USS Philippine Sea, and destroyers USS Gravely and USS Mason. Combined, these strike groups brought approximately 130 FA-18 Super Hornets, 20 EA-18G Growler electronic warfare aircraft, 12 Mach-60R Seahawk helicopters, and more than 15,000 sailors and aviators into a combat theater where Iran had spent 40 years preparing to fight. But the real difference maker, the asset that changed everything, was the arrival of 4 Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships: USS Champion, USS Devastator, USS Dexterous, and USS Gladiator, flown into the region via C-5M Super Galaxy transport aircraft and reassembled at Naval Support Activity Bahrain between March 4th and March 6th. As reported by Breaking Defense on March 8th, these mine hunters carry AN SQQ-32 sonar systems capable of detecting moored and bottom mines at depths up to 300 feet, and they deploy Sea-Fox mine disposal systems that can neutralize threats without ever putting divers in the water. The mission was clear: find the mines, destroy them, reopen the strait, and do it fast enough to prevent a global economic collapse. Now, here is where it gets deeply technical and deeply important. Iran's strategy for closing Hormuz was not improvised. It was the product of decades of planning, billions of dollars in investment, and a military doctrine specifically designed to exploit one geographic fact. The Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest is only 21 miles wide. The shipping lanes that deep draft tankers can actually use are even narrower, approximately 2 miles wide in each direction, separated by a 2-mile buffer zone. According to the Congressional Research Service's 2024 report on Iran's naval forces, the IRGC Navy had pre-positioned mine-laying capabilities along the strait's northern coast, stockpiled thousands of bottom-influence mines and moored contact mines, and trained extensively on rapid deployment scenarios. The Center for Strategic and International Studies analyzed this strategy in a 2023 wargame simulation and concluded that Iran could theoretically close the strait to commercial traffic within 48 hours if it committed fully to the operation, and that is exactly what Iran attempted. Beginning on February 28th, IRGC Navy fast attack craft, including Shahid Nazari-class vessels and smaller Bogomar speedboats, deployed from bases at Bandar Abbas, Chesham Island, and Abu Musa, racing into the strait under cover of darkness. According to U.S. Fifth Fleet Commander Vice Admiral George Wyckoff, speaking at a March 9th briefing aboard the USS Nimitz, Iranian forces laid a combination of EM-52 rocket-propelled rising mines, Chinese-origin EM-11 moored mines, and older Soviet-era AMD-500 anti-invasion mines across at least 6 confirmed fields spanning both the eastern and western approaches to the strait. These were not crude weapons. The EM-52, as detailed in a 2022 Naval War College review analysis, is a bottom mine that sits dormant until its acoustic and magnetic sensors detect a ship's signature overhead, at which point a rocket motor fires a warhead up toward the hull at more than 50 knots. It is designed specifically to defeat the deep keels of large tankers and cannot be swept using traditional methods. You have to find each one individually and destroy it. And here is what made Iran's plan so dangerous and so desperately reckless. The mine-laying operation was synchronized with a swarm attack doctrine. As Vice Admiral Wyckoff explained, IRGC naval forces positioned approximately 80 fast attack craft in concealed positions along the Iranian coastline, equipped with C-802 anti-ship cruise missiles, 107mm rocket pods, and in some cases, portable versions of the Dalavia anti-tank guided missile, repurposed for maritime use. The plan was textbook asymmetric warfare. Lay the mines to channel shipping into predictable routes, then hit those routes with massed small boat swarms launching from multiple directions simultaneously. No navy in the world, not even the United States Navy, can defend a high-value tanker against 20 speedboats attacking from 360 degrees all at once in confined waters. The math simply does not work. And Iran knew it. This was the insurance policy. This was the leverage that was supposed to bring the United States to the negotiating table, force a ceasefire, and preserve the regime. But there was a fatal flaw in the entire strategy. And it was so fundamental, so structurally obvious that it is stunning Iran's leadership did not see it coming. Here is the fatal flaw. Iran's Hormuz strategy assumed the United States would prioritize keeping the shipping lanes open over destroying Iran's ability to close them. It assumed a defensive American posture. It assumed the U.S. would deploy minesweepers and escort tankers and absorb casualties while trying to maintain the flow of oil. That assumption was lethally incorrect, because the United States did not come to defend the strait. It came to annihilate every Iranian naval asset within 200 miles of it. On March 6th, President Donald Trump gave U.S. Central Command a direct order, as reported by the Wall Street Journal. The mission was not to escort tankers through a minefield. The mission was to sink Iran's navy, clear every mine, and ensure that Iran would never again possess the capability to threaten closure of the Strait of Hormuz. This was not a defensive operation. This was the systematic destruction of Iran's entire naval force, and it began with a weapon Iran never saw coming. The AN/SLQ-32V7 Surface Electronic Warfare Improvement Program System, known as SEWIP Block 3, had only been operationally deployed on U.S. Navy destroyers beginning in late 2024. According to Defense News reporting from January 2025, the system provides electronic attack capabilities that can jam enemy radars and communications at ranges exceeding 100 nautical miles. The Eisenhower Strike Group destroyers carried this system. And when IRGC coastal radar sites lit up to track the incoming carrier groups, the SEWEP systems went active. Vice Admiral Wyckoff described what happened next in his March 9th briefing. Iranian coastal surveillance radars across Keshem Island, Larek Island, and the Hormozgan province coastline were electronically suppressed within the first 90 minutes of Operation Open Waters. The IRGC Navy's command and control network, which had relied on coastal radar feeds to coordinate its swarm attack plan, went effectively blind. At the same moment, EA-18G Growlers from Carrier Air Wing 11 aboard the Nimitz launched a coordinated electronic warfare and kinetic strike package. As reported by the War Zone on March 8th, Growlers jammed the navigation and communication systems of IRGC fast attack craft positioned in concealed coves along the coastline, while FA-18E Super Hornets followed seconds behind, releasing AGM-84 Harpoon anti-ship missiles and AGM-154 joint standoff weapons loaded with BLU-111 general-purpose bombs. The results were devastating. According to CENTCOM's March 10th operational update, 17 Iranian fast attack craft were destroyed in the opening 6 hours of strikes. By the 24-hour mark, that number had climbed to 31. Within 72 hours, U.S. forces had sunk or permanently disabled 43 Iranian naval vessels, representing approximately 35% of the IRGC Navy's operational fleet, according to analysis by the International Institute for Strategic Studies published on March 11th. Iran's swarm attack capability, the core of its anti-access strategy, had been shattered before it ever got the chance to swarm, but the mines were still there, and clearing them required a different kind of warfare altogether. This is where the Avenger-class mine countermeasures ships entered the picture, and this is where the operation became a painstaking, dangerous, and absolutely critical race against time. The AN/SQQ-32 sonar system operates by emitting high-frequency sound pulses and analyzing the return echoes to build a three-dimensional acoustic image of the seafloor. As detailed in a U.S. Navy mine warfare manual published in 2023, the system can differentiate between rocks, debris, marine life, and the distinct acoustic signature of a naval mine casing. Once a potential mine is detected, the Avenger-class ships deploy a Seafox expendable mine disposal system, essentially a small unmanned underwater vehicle packed with explosives that swims to the mine under remote control and detonates on contact, destroying the mine without risking human divers. Between March 6th and March 14th, according to U.S. Fifth Fleet Public Affairs releases, American mine countermeasures forces working in rotating 18-hour shifts cleared 127 confirmed naval mines from 6 separate minefields across the Strait of Hormuz and the approaches to the Gulf of Oman. The HMS Cadistock and HMS Ledbury, 2 British Royal Navy mine hunters that had been pre-positioned in the region, assisted in clearing an additional 34 mines from the western approaches. Coalition mine warfare forces from France and Australia contributed explosive ordnance disposal divers and remote-operated vehicle support. This was not a U.S.-only operation. This was a coordinated international effort to break Iran's blockade and reopen the world's most important oil choke point. And while the mines were being cleared, U.S. naval aviation was systematically destroying Iran's ability to lay more. According to Vice Admiral Wyckoff's briefing, American strike aircraft hit 22 confirmed IRGC naval facilities along the Iranian coast, including the naval bases at Bandar Abbas, the IRGC Fast Attack Craft Maintenance Yard on Keshem Island, and the mine storage depot at Jask. Satellite imagery published by Planet Labs on March 12th showed extensive damage to pier facilities at Bandar Abbas, with several piers completely collapsed into the water and burn scars visible across adjacent warehouse structures. The message was unmistakable. Iran would not be allowed to regenerate this capability, not in weeks, not in months, not at all. Now, the numbers on the economic side tell a story that is just as dramatic as the military campaign. When Hormuz effectively closed on February 28th, oil prices spiked, as we mentioned, to $147 per barrel. But as Operation Open Waters progressed and tanker traffic began moving again, prices fell sharply. By March 10th, Brent crude had dropped to $118 per barrel. By March 15th, it was at a 103s. By March 20th, according to Bloomberg Commodity Tracking, crude had stabilized at $96 per barrel, still elevated from pre-conflict levels, but nowhere near the catastrophic territory that economists had feared. The global economy had stared into the abyss of energy disruption and stepped back. And it stepped back because the United States Navy made it possible. This is a moment to make sure you're subscribed to Global Watch News. We are tracking the most critical military and economic developments on the planet, breaking down what is happening in real time, and giving you the analysis that the mainstream outlets are not providing. Hit subscribe, enable notifications, and stay with us as we continue following Operation Open Waters and the reshaping of Middle East power dynamics. Now let's talk about what this means strategically, because the implications of what just happened in the Strait of Hormuz extend far beyond oil shipments and mine clearance. For 40 years, Iran's control over Hormuz was the regime's ultimate insurance policy. It was the one piece of leverage that guaranteed the world had to take Tehran seriously, had to negotiate, had to tolerate a certain level of aggression, because the alternative, a closed strait and a global energy crisis, was simply too dangerous to risk. That leverage is gone, and it is not coming back. Dr. Farzin Nadimi, a senior fellow at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy, described the situation in a March 13th analysis. He noted that Iran's naval posture in the Persian Gulf had been built over decades, carefully constructed to exploit geography, but that it was also inherently fragile. Once the U.S. committed to offensive operations rather than defensive escort duties, Iran's small boat navy became a liability instead of an asset. The IRGC fast attack craft that were supposed to be the tip of the spear became floating targets the moment American electronic warfare systems blinded their radars, and American strike aircraft had unrestricted access to the skies above them. What was once a credible swarm threat became a turkey shoot, and there is one more layer to all of this that makes Iran's situation even more desperate. The United States is not just clearing the mines and reopening the strait, it is fortifying its presence to ensure the strait stays open permanently. On March 14th, according to USNI News, the Pentagon announced the deployment of 2 additional Independence-class littoral combat ships, USS Mobile and USS Savannah, to the Persian Gulf specifically for ongoing mine countermeasures and surface warfare patrol missions. These ships, equipped with MH-60S helicopters carrying airborne laser mine detection systems and Mk-18 Mod 2 unmanned underwater vehicles, will maintain a continuous presence in the strait alongside rotational Arleigh Burke-class destroyers. According to a senior defense official speaking to Reuters on March 16th, the U.S. is establishing what the official called persistent overwatch of the Hormuz choke point, meaning 24/7 surveillance, rapid response strike capabilities, and the demonstrated will to use them. The contrast with previous administrations could not be more stark. During the Obama administration, when Iran harassed U.S. Navy vessels and detained American sailors in 2016, the U.S. response was diplomatic protest. During the Trump administration's first term, when Iran attacked tankers in 2019, the U.S. response was restrained and defensive. But now, in 2025, the response has been total and overwhelming. Iran tried to close Hormuz, and the United States didn't just reopen it. The U.S. destroyed the Iranian Navy, cleared every mine, struck every coastal launch site, and deployed enough persistent naval power to guarantee it never happens again. This is not deterrence, this is dominance. For the global economy, the implications are profound. Japan, which imports approximately 95% of its oil and relies on Hormuz for nearly 90% of those imports, saw its energy security crisis evaporate within 2 weeks. South Korea, importing roughly 70% of its crude through the strait, according to Korea National Oil Corporation data, went from rationing discussions to supply stabilization. India, importing about 62% of its crude oil through Hormuz per the Indian Ministry of Petroleum, avoided what could have been an economic catastrophe. China, the world's largest oil importer, bringing in approximately 10 million barrels per day and routing roughly half through Hormuz, watched as the United States secured the choke point that Beijing's entire economy depends on, but has no ability to secure itself. And that last point is particularly significant because for all of China's talk of becoming a global superpower, for all its naval expansion and aircraft carrier development, when the Strait of Hormuz was threatened, it was the United States Navy that sailed in and cleared it. China's energy security in that moment depended entirely on American military power. That is not a comfortable reality for Beijing, and it is not one that Chinese leadership will forget. For Russia, watching from Moscow, this is yet another strategic setback. Iran was one of the pillars of Russia's alternative power axis, the coalition of states resisting American influence. But as Iran's military collapses, as its missile cities are buried, as its navy is sunk, as its nuclear program is destroyed, Russia's position in the Middle East collapses with it. Moscow has no ability to project the kind of power the United States just demonstrated. It cannot deploy carrier strike groups to the Persian Gulf. It cannot clear minefields thousands of miles from Russian shores. It cannot sustain the kind of precision strike campaign that just dismantled Iran's coastal defenses. Russia is a regional power with nuclear weapons and a propaganda apparatus. The United States is a global power with reach, capability, and as the world just witnessed, the will to use both. The broader lesson here is not just about military capability. Everyone knew the United States had a powerful navy. The lesson is about commitment and credibility. For years, analysts questioned whether the United States would actually risk conflict to secure the Strait of Hormuz, or would instead seek diplomatic solutions and manage de-escalation. Iran's leadership clearly believed the latter. They believed American risk aversion, fear of casualties, and concern about oil price spikes would prevent a full-scale offensive operation. They were wrong. When President Trump ordered Central Command to reopen Hormuz, he did not order a defensive escort mission. He ordered the destruction of Iran's navy and the permanent neutralization of the threat. And that is exactly what happened. Vice Admiral Wyckoff, in his March 9th briefing, was asked by a reporter whether the operation had been risky given the potential for escalation. His response was telling. He said that the real risk would have been allowing Iran to believe it could hold the global economy hostage with impunity. He said that restoring freedom of navigation was not an option or a preference. It was a mission imperative directly tied to American national security and global economic stability. And he said that the United States Navy had demonstrated in the clearest possible terms that it has the capability and the will to ensure that the world's most critical maritime choke points remain open. Not through negotiation, not through compromise, through the application of overwhelming naval power and the total destruction of any force that tries to close them. The satellite imagery tells the final chapter of this story better than any briefing ever could. Planet Labs published before and after images of Bandar Abbas Naval Base on March 18th. The piers where IRGC fast attack craft once moored are shattered. The warehouses that stored mines and munitions are collapsed. The maintenance facilities that kept the fleet operational are burned out shells. The base that was the beating heart of Iran's Hormuz strategy is a ruin, and in the waters of the strait itself, maritime tracking data from Vortexa and tankertrackers.com shows a river of crude oil tankers flowing east toward Asia and west toward Europe, just as they did before Iran ever tried to close the choke point. The global economy kept moving, and it kept moving because the United States Navy ensured that it would. There is something almost tragic in how completely Iran miscalculated. The regime spent 40 years building a military strategy around one geographic advantage. It spent billions of dollars on fast attack craft, mine stockpiles, coastal missile batteries, and command and control networks. It trained thousands of IRGC naval personnel specifically for the mission of closing Hormuz. And when the moment came to execute that strategy, when Iran committed fully to the operation it had spent decades preparing for, the entire structure collapsed in less than 2 weeks. The swarm boats were sunk before they could swarm, the mines were cleared before they could sink a single tanker, the coastal defenses were destroyed before they could fire more than a handful of missiles, and the leverage that was supposed to guarantee regime survival became the final proof of regime failure. The United States required 14 days to dismantle what Iran spent 40 years building, 14 days to sink 43 naval vessels, clear 127 mines, destroy 22 coastal facilities, and reopen the world's most important oil road. That is not just a tactical victory. That is a strategic humiliation. And it is one that will define the power dynamics of the Persian Gulf for decades to come. We will, of course, keep you updated as tanker traffic continues to normalize, as additional Iranian naval capabilities are identified and neutralized, and as the broader consequences of this campaign reshape Middle East security and global energy markets. This is Global Watch News. It's Global Watch. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any of it, and thank you for watching.